Thanks for joining us for this month's Best Practices webinar on this June 18th. And I'm really pleased to have with us Remco Jonker from Mainnovation, who's going to be presenting today's topic on building a winning maintenance strategy. And for those of you who regularly attend our webinars, Remco and Mainnovation have done several sessions for us, very successful ones, and we're always pleased to have him with us. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Remco, he is a graduate of the Royal Netherlands Naval College, served in the Royal Netherlands Navy as an officer for 10 years, is an industrial engineer, and has a Master's of Science from Eindhoven University of Technology. He also has over 20 years experience in maintenance and asset management improving projects, is a former chairman of the CMMS section of the Maintenance Association of the Netherlands, and he's also a regular speaker and chairman at the various international maintenance conferences. Remco's also the co-author of a book called Value-Driven Maintenance, and we're going to pick a name at random from the attendees at the conclusion of this webinar, and we're going to have one lucky winner who will receive a signed copy of that book. So again, please join me in welcoming Remco. Remco, are you on the line with me?
Yes, I am, Rona. Good afternoon.
And thanks again for putting this together, Remco. And while people are dialing in, because I know we had quite a high number of attendees today, maybe you can give us a little background, Remco, of why you chose this topic. There's a variety of topics that you can present, but what prompted you to put this topic together and do a session on it for us?
Yes, the topic today is about how to build a winning maintenance strategy. Well, we see in our daily practice and within the different organizations that we support that setting up a winning maintenance strategy is not that easy in the day-to-day business. A solid strategy that is enabling you to get fit for the future. We see that a lot of companies are struggling with that, how to define it, how to set it up, and also how they determine where they are today. Should they use benchmarking for that, or are there any other methodologies or tools that can be used? And questions like how do we set realistic targets and ambition levels for the future, so for tomorrow. And if we know how we want to improve or what we would like to improve, what the ambition levels are, the targets are, how can we improve ourselves, and which best practices are available in the market? There are so many out there, but which fits the needs of our organization? And how do we change, in fact, from setting up and defining a vision, a desired future state, and turn that into an action plan that we can implement and embed in the day-to-day operations? And if we start improving ourselves, how do we monitor the progress of the improvement, but also whether we are on track or not? What kind of key performance indicators can we use to do that? And, well, altogether, which tools are available in the market that could support us in this, in fact, start-to-finish process? Those are the main reasons, and at the same time will also be the questions that will be addressed today.
Excellent. Okay. Well, before we get started and I turn things over to Remco, let me just take a moment to tell our listeners a little bit about the format. We are recording today's session, and we will make available to all the attendees a link with a copy of the recording in the next day or so. Also, as I mentioned, one name will be drawn at random at the end of the webinar, and Remco will be sending out a copy of the book that he co-authored, Value-Driven Maintenance. I did want to let attendees know that Remco has agreed to stay right through the end of the hour and answer any questions at the conclusion of the webinar. But I will have your phones muted, so if you do have questions, please type them into the questions feature in GoToWebinar. You can do that at any time during the presentation, and then I'll go ahead and read them to Remco at the end. So again, thanks everybody for listening, and Remco, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much again, Rona. Yes, the topic of today, as discussed, is how to build a winning maintenance strategy. And to do that properly, we need to go through the following agenda. First of all, understanding the value of maintenance. What is in fact the added value of maintenance? Where should we focus on? and how could techniques like net present value calculations help us with that. So in this agenda topic, I will highlight an example how to calculate the added value of maintenance. If we then know where to focus on, we need to define the winning maintenance strategy. And in this agenda topic, I will highlight how benchmarking can be used to determine where you are today, but also how to set targets for tomorrow. And if you want to bridge the gap between today and tomorrow, which best practices could be applied to get there? Then we go to the implementation of the winning strategy. And when we are implementing, it should be successful and it should be done as, let's say, from our perspective in an integral way, meaning that we always look at 5 areas of attention. It is IT, content, data quality, the processes, the organization, and performance management, everything around KPIs. Those are the 5 attention areas that we will look into in this agenda point. If we are implementing, then we also want to monitor the winning strategy, and I will highlight a tool, a dashboard that can be used to monitor the progress that you make and the achievements that you get. And finally, I will wrap up, and there will be a Q&A session. If there are any questions, I will answer them at the end of this webinar. So, well, you could ask yourself, what is in fact my winning strategy, my winning maintenance strategy? Do you have one in place already, or did you try to implement it and were not successful? So keep that in your mind. What is your winning strategy today? And I hope that I can help you in determining and to set it up tomorrow. But before we go there, I would like to go to the next, or in fact the first poll. And the question is, what is your most important strategic objective today? Is it A, to serve production the best way we can, B, to stay within budget at all times, C, to become or remain a world-class, best-in-class maintenance organization, or D, to make money for my company? And to start up the poll, I will hand over to Rona.
Great. Okay, I'm going to launch the poll now, and you can enter your response by typing directly into your keyboard, and let us know what is your most important strategic direct objective. Is it A, to serve production, B, to stay within budget, C, to become world-class, or D, making money? All right, so I guess you might have all of those objectives, but which one is most important? Please just type the answers into your keyboard, and when I'm done, I'll share the results with everyone. It looks like we've had about 70% of the votes cast, so let's leave this open a few more seconds. Again, just type on respond A, B, C, or D. All right, let me go ahead. It looks like everyone has voted. I'm going to share the results. And Remco, what we saw is A received 38% of the votes to serve production. B, to stay within budget, only 7%. C was 39%, becoming or remaining world-class. And D, making money for my company, had 16%. So A and C were the 2 top results. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rona, for this interesting result. Because if we look at this, yes, A, B, and C, we all need to do that, in fact. But in the end, what I hope to show you today, that we need to make money with maintenance. We need to make money with maintenance. And maybe better said, we need to add value to the overall company result with maintenance. Okay, so we need to make money with maintenance. Let's take that to the real life, because we think we can make money with maintenance. But in the day-to-day business, that is not easy as it seems. Because if we ask the board, is maintenance and reliability, is that important? Then the board of directors and the financial manager will say, yes, maintenance is very important. But then if the economic tides go down, maintenance doesn't seem to be that important anymore. It is still treated as a cost center oftentimes, or even a necessary evil. And we also see that technical managers, maintenance and engineering managers, are very technically skilled. Their expertise is very high. But if we look at it from the perspective of economics or corporate finance, then there's still a lot to train and educate. So we see that's difficult for maintenance managers to convince the board, in fact, to speak the same language as the board. And I can tell you one thing, the language of the board is not about uptime, technical availability, mean time between failure. No, the language of the board is about cash, money, dollars, present value, net present value, things like that. And if we are not able to convince the decision makers to take the right decisions and the need to invest in improvements, then things like the examples shown here will remain happening. So we don't speak the same language, and at the same time we also see that our strategies are not smart enough, meaning that we're not able to quantify the things we want the board in fact to decide. So we need to speak the same language as the board, and that is in fact why value-driven maintenance was developed a couple of years ago. VDM, value-driven maintenance, is the first and only maintenance methodology that really calculates the economic added value of maintenance, using net present value techniques and industry-specific maintenance benchmarks. VDM supports the priority setting and defining the right targets where we want to aim for in the future, in the upcoming years. And we will also see in this presentation that VDM creates a continuous improvement mindset with the yearly improvement cycles to determine where you are, where you deviate from your target, and how you could improve that. We'll also see that it does not only help you to focus on uptime, for example, today, but if the economic tides go down, if the economic climate is going bad, then we need to switch, for example, to cost control. At the same time, VDM boosts the speed of improving by using proven best practices and the full capabilities of modern computerized maintenance management systems and enterprise asset management systems like SAP, Oracle EAM, DataStream or Infor EAM, Maximo, systems like that. VDM provides an all-inclusive maintenance management framework, filling the gaps that are not covered by existing methodologies like TPM and RCM. So VDM in itself is not replacing other best practices, but it helps you to determine which of those best practices out there fit the best in your specific situation. And if we look at total productive maintenance, it's a great best practice to increase overall equipment effectiveness, increase uptime. But there's nothing in that methodology about how to get grip on costs or lowering the costs. And RCM is a fantastic best practice to set up, define and optimize your preventive maintenance program. However, only for the most critical assets and equipment, because we all know that's very labor intensive. So for other equipment you might use techniques like planned maintenance optimization or failure modes and effects analysis. So it's a start to finish approach, a framework that can help you to really add value to the overall company result. So we see the book here shown, and let's open up the book a little bit and spoil ourselves with some corporate finance. So what is in fact the definition of value? Well, value is the sum of all free future cash flows discounted to today. All free future cash flows, that is the difference between income and expenditures. It's not the difference between revenue and costs, because those figures can be influenced by accountants. And we have seen in the day-to-day news where that can lead to. So now we need the difference between income and expenditures, the free future cash flows, what's getting into the company cash-wise and what is getting out of the company. So if we translate that to a formula, then the present value formula is shown here. There you see the sum of those future cash flows discounted to the value of today. And therefore we need the opportunity cost of capital or the discount rate or hurdle rate. We need to discount the future values in fact to the value of today, because $100 today is more worth than $100 within 5 years. Well, why is that? Well, if I put it on the bank, this $100 today, it should be 130, 140 within 5 years. And if not, well, I should put it on the bank, right? So if I put it on the bank and get 130 or 140 bucks, if I want to invest it in an improvement program, that program should bring me more than 130 or 140 bucks, because else I put it in the bank. So that's why I like that term of hurdle rate. You need to get across a certain hurdle to justify your improvement. But many of you would say, yes, but we also need some investments, and that is correct. And then we go to the net present value formula, where the C0 is in fact the investment in year 0, and later on there could be more investments, or, of course, per year. In this case, if we assume that the cash flows in the future are sustainable year after year, then we can use the following shortcut formula. The net present value is that investment, the cash flow in year 0, plus the free future cash flows divided by R, divided by the discounted value of today, so by the hurdle rate. So that's the formula, the last formula we are going to use. So this is corporate finance, ladies and gentlemen, but let's take this to our maintenance organization. And in fact, what we're saying is that maintenance is able to add value to the overall company result in 4 ways. 1, asset utilization, increasing uptime. If we increase the technical availability of the equipment and we produce more products, we sell more products, then we create more value. If we are able to lower the costs with 5%, for example, then we create value for the company too for the upcoming years. If we comply better to legislation, safety, health and environment, then the chance that we are losing our license to operate is minimized, and that also creates value for the company, because without it we cannot produce, there's no uptime. And resource allocation is about allocating the resources like people and spares properly. And from a value perspective, we look at the value of spares on stock. If we are able to lower that value, we also create value for the company, because we have less insurance costs, less energy costs, utility costs, things like that. And all those 4 value drivers are interconnected, because if you lower the spare amount too much, then you will jeopardize uptime. Okay, so if we then apply that net present value formula to maintenance, the formula looks like this. This is the value opportunity for maintenance. It is the sum, and most of you will recognize here that net present value formula, the sum of the free future cash flows for the improvement program on the asset utilization side, cost control, resource allocation, and G, so complying better to legislation. So this is the formula that we apply to maintenance. And I will give you a calculation example in a couple of minutes. Keep in mind, this is a bit of mathematics, but the formula is a tool to prioritize between the different value drivers. Nothing more than that. So the main objective is to determine the most important or the dominant value driver. Okay, so the value calculation and the value potential depends in fact on one hand of what is the impact of 1% less costs or 1% higher uptime, and that multiplied with, as we call it, the performance gap. So if we look at the left side, the actual performance, where are we today? Where would we like to be tomorrow? And so we see the KPI here of maintenance costs divided by the asset replacement value. If the current value is 5%, the best practice is 2%. That's theoretically achievable, but realistically we're saying we could lower it from 5 to 4%. Well, that is minus 1% on a starting figure of 5. That's in fact a 20% reduction. So if we bring that KPI of maintenance cost divided by the asset replacement value back from 5% to 4%, that is an improvement of 20%. And then we need to know what the impact is of 1% less costs from a dollar perspective. And if we then multiply that, we get the total value potential. Well, this is enough about the theory. Let's go to a practical example. Following assumptions, there is sustainable improvement. The market is growing. That's very important for uptime, for example, because if the market is going down, we can increase uptime, produce more goods, but we cannot sell more goods, so we will not create more value. And the hurdle rate, or the cost of capital, is 10%, 0.1. So let's take a look. The asset replacement value in this example is $200 million, and the current maintenance spending is $10 million. So that was the actual maintenance budget of last year, for example. So if we then look at the maintenance KPI, maintenance costs divided by the asset replacement value, if I would rebuild this plant or network today, what would it cost me? Is 5%. So that's the 10 million divided by the 200 million. That is the current score of this KPI. If we then look at 1% improvement, well, that's 1% of the 10 million of the maintenance spending. That is 0.1 million per year, $100,000 per year. And then the net present value, in accordance with the formula that we have just shown, is 0.1 million divided by the hurdle rate or discount factor of 0.1 is a net present value of 1% change of $1 million, right? And then we have to look at the performance gap. So where are we today and where could we be tomorrow? Well, we saw that the current KPI score on the cost side was 5%. Well, let's say that we think we can realistically achieve within 2 years a decrease to 4%, then the relative change of 5 to 4% is in fact 20%, right? It's a 1% absolute change. We started with 5. As you can see, that is 20%. So what is then the value potential? 1% is 1 million. The performance gap is 20%. So yes, the value potential or cost control is that 1 million of the 1% multiplied with the 20%, which is $20 million totally, or $2 million per year. So the $20 million is getting $2 million each year discounted to the value of today, with a horizon, for example, of 10 years. If we invest $500,000 to improve ourselves by implementing asset-based budgeting as best practice, for example, then the NPV ends up with $90.5 million, which makes it very profitable to implement this improvement program. Okay, let me take you to the asset utilization side. The asset utilization, the uptime, we relate to, in fact, the annual profit. It is the EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. I always say it's the most virgin figure for profit. The figure for profit before accountants could lay their hands on it. So let's assume that the EBITDA in this case is $90 million and the technical availability is 90%. The market is growing. So that means, in fact, that with the current 90% availability, we get $90 million. So then we can calculate what 1% means. 1% is then, in fact, $1 million, right? And if we calculate that to the net present value, we have to divide by the discount factor. We include that horizon of 10 years. Then the net present value of a 1% increase of uptime for the upcoming 10 years is $10 million. Okay, but the performance gap, right? We have a current KPI score of 90%. The realistically achievable target within 2 years could be, for example, 92%. That change of the current 90% minus the 92 ends up as a relative change of 2.2%, as you can see in this example. So what would then be the value potential? Well, that is that 2.2% relative change multiplied by what does 1% mean from a value perspective. 1% was $10 million. So it means we end up with a $22 million opportunity. And if we need to invest $5 million to increase uptime by implementing overall equipment effectiveness tools, for example, things like that, then that could cost $5 million. Then we still end up with a net present value on the asset utilization side of $17 million. So that's how you could demonstrate the added value of your improvement program, the added value of maintenance to your company. Okay, let's take it to your own organization, and therefore we are going to the next poll. And the question is, which value driver has the biggest value potential in your organization and current market situation? Is it asset utilization, more uptime, we sell more products, create more value? Is it cost control, reduce maintenance and reliability spending? Is it regulatory, compliance to safety, health and environment legislation? Or is it the resource allocation? We need to reduce spare parts and the stock level of it. I would like to hand over to Rona for this poll.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the next poll. So Remco is asking for your answers, and please type them directly into the keyboard, not into the question feature, but respond to the poll that says, which value driver has the biggest potential value in your organization based on your current market situation? Asset utilization or uptime is A. B is cost control. C is complying with safety, health, and environmental legislation. I see there's a typo there, I apologize. And D is resource allocation, or reducing inventory. So we have over 2/3 of the votes in, so let's leave the poll open for a little bit more. And please remember, those of you with questions, feel free to type them in the question box at any time, and Remco will answer them at the conclusion of the session. All right, we've got a couple more votes coming in. Leave it open a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to share the results now. Remco, 41% said A, or asset utilization, uptime, and selling more product is their biggest potential. 47% said B, or cost control, reducing the spending. 9% said compliance, or C, complying with safe, healthy, health and environmental legislation. And just 3% said resource allocation, or lowering spare parts inventory. All right, back to you.
Thank you, Rona. Well, interesting outcome, but it was expected that asset utilization and cost control are the most important. But my message would be to remember the following, that your dominant value driver today probably will not remain the dominant value driver for the upcoming 5 or 10 years. It will change in due time, right? So what we see is that in many cases, one value driver will be the most important one. But you could focus on uptime today, but if the market situation is going down, if it's decreasing, then you will have to switch to cost control, as Volvo Cars, the company Volvo Cars, had to do a couple of years ago. We will see that example later. It will change over time, because also if you are increasing the uptime continuously and you are successful, then in due time another value driver will become dominant, because if your uptime today ends up with 99.5%, there is not much more value potential to gain there. So the value driver will change in time, and it might also even change within the same company or even within the same plant, depending on the product or the product line that you are, the production line that you are focusing on. So therefore I included also the product life cycle, where you see the resource allocation, making sure that the production line is geared up to manufacture cars, for example, or make sure that the network is built. Then it's all about growth, making sure it's up, that products are sold, and then oftentimes we see competitors coming into the market, and then it changes to cost control. So we see that chemical companies, for example, many of them are in the cost control phase right now, while spending lots of money in the 80s and 90s on asset utilization, while the pharmaceutical or life science companies just started to learn about maintenance somewhere the mid-90s because of the different developments with FDA things and patents expiring and more competitors. Therefore they had to change to cost control, for example. One thing is important. You could use benchmarking to determine what your improvement potential could be, but that data, of course, must be reliable and also industry specific. Another thing that you never should try to improve everything at once, but just try to focus on those items that link up with your dominant value driver, with uptime or cost, for example. I would like to highlight some examples now of companies that are currently making money with maintenance. They show that maintenance makes a difference if we look in these companies. If we look at the DSM, I will show that example later. It's a life science and chemical company. We see GlaxoSmithKline in here, but also Volvo Cars, where we see the maintenance manager of the Torslanda plant in Sweden, who was able to reduce costs per car with 50%, and then we talk about maintenance costs. So that's quite an achievement, reducing costs with values like that without jeopardizing uptime or SHE implications. All right, so we went through the value of maintenance. You understand the value of maintenance. You know how to calculate the added value of maintenance. Now let's define the winning strategy and show you a roadmap to do that. Well, VDM uses the roadmap to continuous improvement, where we start, in fact, with the vision phase. Where are we? Where should we be tomorrow? Then creation. The project is defined. We are improving reliability, designing work processes, optimize IT, align the organization, and then, well, I would almost say it becomes really important, because then, in fact, the project only starts the implementation in the operation phase. That's why we all do this, right? To embed the changes in the day-to-day operation. And then it's necessary to monitor the results and, let's say, take improvement actions if we deviate from our targets. So let's zoom in on the vision phase. We need to collect basic data, KPI data, for example. We need to communicate why we are setting up a new vision for the future. Then we go to the current state analysis. So you determine the value of the key performance indicators, benchmark yourself with industry peers, determine where you are today and where you should be tomorrow or could be tomorrow. And of course that should be linked up with the dominant value driver. Then we go to the future state visioning. So if we know what we would like to improve, the question is, how can we improve it? So which best practices could we use? And oftentimes there are also internal best practices. And in a multi-plant, multi-site situation, the plants can learn a lot from each other. We also need to determine realistic targets. So we will not lower the KPI of maintenance cost divided by the asset replacement value from 5% to 1% in 1 year. It might be theoretically, but we will never get there in 1 year. So make sure that the target setting is realistic to get the right buy-in and also the motivation to reach that target. And if we know that dot on the horizon, that is where we want to be in the future, in the upcoming 1 to 3 years, derive your action plan from that, your improvement program, how exactly to get there. Right, so we have seen that we know where to focus on. It could be asset utilization, SHE, or cost control. Then we need to translate that in VDM to the competencies. So this is one level deeper. Here we look at the asset utilization. So we need to set up the performance planning for equipment with production, setting up service level agreements, translate that to the reliability engineering competence or the preventive maintenance program, start planning, preparing, and executing. And if uptime is important, we need to register our losses properly. But if cost control is important, we need a best practice to set up the maintenance budget the right way. And we need full cost registration. So we need to see the costs of contractors on work orders, the issuing of spares, but also the hours of our internal labor. And resource allocation down below, we see MRO supply chain management, that's about inventory control, service supply chain management, procurement, hiring of contractors, skills, and equipment knowledge management that is related to all data connected to your equipment, like P&IDs, manuals, drawings, things like that. And we see that reliability engineering is in the center, in fact, of both circles. So that's a very important competence. So these are the buttons that we can push, the changes that we can make. So we monitored, in fact, the key performance indicators. So with the control panel that you see here, we see the 10 different key performance indicators that are standardized within VDM. So we use those key performance indicators to perform the benchmark. And at a glance, we see that on the cost control side, this company is doing better than average, while on the SHE side, they are doing not so good, and on the asset utilization side, they have an average score. So this is in fact that one picture of the current maintenance organization and how they perform. But then we need to benchmark, and for the benchmark we use the mybdm.com tool. It's a secure tool that is available online. What is important that all data in this tool, there are over 500 companies in this tool in different industries, but all data in that tool is validated by consultants on site, because if you get the data in, it's never proper or trustful one-on-one. You need to challenge the data, and you need, as a consultant, also to go on site to look, feel and smell what's happening in that network, that fleet or that plant. So companies are benchmarked with their industry peers, and based on that, as we see in the picture of the maintenance cost divided by the asset replacement value, that graph on the lower side, we see the actual score and also what the theoretical improvement potential would be. Let's say the score of the best practice. So let me give you an example of a company that is using this. Here we see one shot deeper in the tool. We see the value, your current value, maintenance cost divided by the asset replacement value, 2.14, and also the value of the industry peers. But if we go to that company, the case study of DSM, I would like to show you. It is a life science and high performance material company with over 100 plants worldwide. And they adopted VDM a couple of years ago, and they achieved a lot with it. As you can see in the performance indicator figure, they outperformed competitors in the industry, and maintenance was a very important contributing factor in that. And they implemented the myvdm.com tool as a benchmarking tool within all plants, and they challenged the maintenance managers every 3 months to benchmark themselves and determine why certain plants had a very good score and what kind of best practices they applied. Through that, they exchanged a lot of knowledge and challenged each other to keep on improving. They achieved a 25% cost reduction without jeopardizing sheet nor asset utilization. This is all quantitative, this is about figures, but we also need to do a kind of qualitative analysis. And therefore we use the maturity matrix, as you can see here. So we determine per maintenance organization what the actual level of maturity or professionalism is. So in this case, reliability engineering, this is a very practical example of a plant that I visited last week. They do not have a reliability engineer on the site. So that competence is very poorly developed. They scored a red in the benchmark, and also from a qualitative perspective, they scored not even level 1. But we see that it's a core competence for this company, so they need to improve, they need to get more mature and implementing the maintenance engineering role and make sure that they move to the right, to level 3, because that's the ambition level of this company. This is a kind of mirror that helps a lot in getting the right awareness in your company. Many people think they are outperforming, they are the best, like we as maintenance people tend to think, right? But if you look at this matrix and you discuss it with the people in the room, then you will find out that they understand that they are not yet on level 4 or 3, but on level 1 or 2, and it really helps to get buy-in for the improvement program. Okay, so we know that we need to take that step from the current state to the future state. How are we going to do it? Well, I promise you to show the different best practices. So as you can see in the book, all those best practices are available, and we linked it up to the value-driven maintenance methodology. So RCM, reliability-centered maintenance for reliability engineering, plant maintenance optimization, TPM as a best practice for increasing the uptime, total predictive maintenance, is it OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. So the statement is, don't try to improve everything, but only those competences that link up, have a direct impact on the dominant value driver, the core competences. So once you know on which competences you need to focus, select the relevant best practices to compile your improvement action plan. So just use what's out there in the market. And I would like to give you an example of such a very high-level improvement plan. But it shows that in this food company, it's a company from the food industry, they have 4 production lines. On the left side we see production lines that are operating in a growing market, while on the other hand we have 2 production lines that are operating in a stable market. And as you can see, on the left side they need to increase uptime, and on the right side they need to reduce costs. And also the high-level actions are defined with that. A company that is applying this way of working a lot already is GlaxoSmithKline. It's one of the leading global players in the life sciences industry, and they use the VDM framework for the maintenance excellence assessment that they perform globally throughout the primary and secondary product divisions. It's a lot of work, a lot of audits each year, because they do it each year to help the plants to improve themselves continuously. So we trained the different GlaxoSmithKline certified auditors in the VDM benchmarking database, and it is a kind of train-the-trainer concept. But by doing that, they are able to audit their own plants year after year. Alright, so we know now what the value is of maintenance, we know the calculations, we define the winning strategy. How can we implement it? Well, then we go to the creation phase, and as I said, there are 5 different areas of attention. It is about the business processes, the organization, skills of people, IT, Maximo, SAP, Infor-EAM, content, about data quality, and performance management. So if you start improving yourself, always look at those 5 attention areas, because one of them will not solve your problem or achieve your goal. You need to focus on all 5. And I will highlight 3 of them: the content, the processes, and performance management. So from a content perspective, please do not wait with improving yourself. Don't start with a huge master data management exercise like we need to have the basics in place first. No, I would almost say just start. Look at your performance killers or your cost drivers, for example, the failure rate of equipment. Try to identify your bad actors today, prove the value potential, and take it from there. So instead of focusing on all the basics, even if the data is not available in the system, it will be available in the brains of people. Set up a risk matrix as is shown here, and I would almost say get going. Rank the criticality of the equipment and get going. Instead of hiding yourself behind the curtain of master data management, of getting the basics in place first. Just engage. Another example is the improvement and standardization of your ways of working through a process blueprint, for example, as you can see here. Here you see the VDM process map, which is completely broken down in different business processes. And that process map was, for example, applied at Volvo Cars. We discussed this case already, but they use the VDM framework because total productive maintenance helped them really to increase overall equipment effectiveness, to increase the uptime, but it didn't give them the right support to lower the cost, to get grip on costs. So to balance those different targets across the sites, they chose VDM as their framework. And they developed in the Volvo Cars manufacturing system project a uniform maintenance strategy, and they translated that into this blueprint, in fact, this maintenance blueprint. And I would like to give you an example of this process blueprint. It looks like this. There we go. So this is the process blueprint. I click on Settle Work Request, for example. Then I get an overview of the input processes and output and the different activities and the descriptions of what should be done. And the strong thing is that we here see the relationship between the process and also, in this case, the GM solution, that is the IT system, could be SAP, could be Maximo. So here are the transactions of their CMMS system included. So here we see the connection between the process and the IT system. And if we click on details, then we see the different responsibilities of the role. So here we see the role of the maintenance manager, the third column there. He's accountable for the different steps, and a project leader or a maintenance engineer might be responsible or should be supportive. And we also see the key performance indicators defined that should help you to get grip on this process. Just an example of how companies, let's say, standardize their process. Okay, back to the Volvo Cars case. As said earlier, they reduced the maintenance costs with about 50%, which is quite an achievement. We discussed processes, we discussed content, and I also promised you performance management. Because if we know how to improve, we need to monitor if we are on track or not. So how can we monitor whether the winning strategy is well, gaining some results? And to do that, I want to introduce a little bit about business intelligence. In fact, here we see the plan, do, check, act circle. On the upper level, we see the yearly benchmark in which you determine where you are today and where you want to be the upcoming year or the upcoming years. You also see the trend of the different key performance indicators there. So on a yearly basis, you determine where you are, and you also set the different targets per competence, in fact. So the targets for uptime, the targets for cost control. And then you embed those targets in the day-to-day business, I would say. Either you download it to Excel, so we're going one level deeper, or you put it into your KPI solution in eMaint, or you use a pre-configured KPI dashboard like the VDM control panel. So on the upper half, you determine your strategy per year, and below you put in your targets of the different KPIs and monitor, in fact, whether you are on track or not to, let's say, manage the deviations. Let's give you an example about a performance measurement instrument. To do that, I would like to introduce this case. It's the RET. It's the public transport company in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And they started a big improvement program. The interesting thing is that they had a direct seat for maintenance in the board, which is fantastic, I would say. It was the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer. They used VDM as a corporate maintenance and asset management model. They did the annual benchmarking and the continuous improvement cycle. They also implemented the process blueprint that I just highlighted in relation with Volvo Cars. They implemented KPIs, but also the meeting structure to communicate and to give it the right follow-up. And they also aligned their sub-EAM system with the business processes. On top of sub-EAM, they put this VDM control panel, which was in fact a dashboard that helped them to monitor the results of their improvement. And that dashboard looks like this. Here we see the dashboard, so you see the competence model, and you also see, in this case, the maintenance cost divided by the asset replacement value. We see that the value is in red and that the trend is negative. So we need to drill down, in fact, on the cost control side to find out what's happening here, to go to the dashboard of cost control. So I click on cost control now, and then I see the overview of the different graphs that are related to maintenance costs. So in the second graph on the top, we see the maintenance budget versus the actuals. We see a lot of other information. Let's focus on this one. And we see that the costs go up rapidly, and it starts in August and September. So let's drill down on September. And if we do that, on the left side, we see the maintenance costs per functional location group. And we see that the assets with the name of Pro have the highest costs in this September period. And on the right side, we see that the corrective work orders cost the majority of the costs. And the colors stand for material cost or hours of internal people or contractors. And then the next question, of course, is which work orders are responsible for that. So we start on the highest level, drill down to find out what the cause was of these high costs, these high actuals. Is it related to preventive maintenance? That's one question, or corrective maintenance. And the other question is which equipment or functional locations were responsible. And then we drill down to the lowest level, the work order level, where we have an interactive report that shows the cost split up per work order. And the interesting thing is that we spend a lot of money and time to do administration, to fill those CMMS and EAM systems with data. But if I ask you, what do you do with the data? Does it really become management information? And is that management information visualized in a way that you really can manage by exception? In the majority of the companies, that is not the case. while that in itself is in fact one of the main reasons to implement CMMS as well as EAM systems. So what did it bring, the RAT? Well, the RAT, the Public Transport Group, they were forced together with The Hague and Amsterdam to put their public transport services out to public tender, because the government thought that it would generate savings of about 120 million euros. That's about, let's say, $160 million. And well, because of the fact that the RAT engaged this improvement program, they were able to lower the costs, and by doing that, they were able to win this bid. So they won the bid. The concession runs for the next 7 years. It will start at the end of 2013. So by applying the improvements, they were able to significantly reduce the maintenance costs per mile that was driven by the buses and the trains. Because of that, they could reduce the backup fleet from a reliability perspective. They won the bid, and with that, they saved about 1,000 jobs. Talking about showing the added value of maintenance. All right, let me recap this webinar. We started with understanding the value of maintenance. I hope I was able to explain you how the added value of maintenance could be translated and calculated in terms of net present value. I gave you 2 examples on the cost control side as well as the asset utilization side, where we related technical availability with the EBITDA, the net profit. On the other hand, then we know where to focus on, right? Uptime, resource allocation, cost control, or SHE. Then we should be able to derive the winning strategy from that by measuring KPIs, benchmarking ourselves, determine which of the competencies, reliability engineering, planning and preparation, inventory control, are the core competencies, have a direct impact on the dominant value driver, and determine which best practices could improve those core competencies. Then we went to the implementation of the winning strategy, and I highlighted 3 out of 5 attention areas, being content, data quality, IT, CMMS systems, the organization, skills of people, processes that can be standardized, and the description of processes, and around all that, performance management, making sure you define and measure the right key performance indicators. And you use that also to monitor the winning strategy, either through Excel, through your eMaint system, or through another dashboard. I gave you an example of how it was done at the public transport company. So let's recap the winning maintenance strategy. We start with the value of maintenance. Know your dominant value driver. Know where you should focus on and calculate it. Show your company internally where the added value of maintenance is. Understand how good you are by using KPIs and determine where you should improve yourself based upon benchmarking. Make sure you set realistic targets. So then you know where to improve and determine how you can improve yourself by applying best practices that are already available in the market. And that link up with each core competencies, that in itself links up with the dominant value driver. And if you start to improve yourself, use an instrument to measure your current performance and ensure that you improve yourself continuously. Because we have seen in the roadmap, the VDM roadmap, that it goes around and around, right? So once you are improving yourself, you need to measure to identify deviations to take further corrective actions. I would like to thank you very much for your attention today and would like to give you the opportunity to ask some questions.
All right, thank you, Remco. We've had quite a few come in during your presentation that I'll go ahead and read to you. And one person wrote in, they're a fleet manager in the transportation industry. Are the formulas that you presented the same in fleet maintenance as they might be in some of the other examples you've given?
Yeah, in fleet maintenance they are also applicable because in the end it's all about, if we look at two value drivers, for example, costs and uptime, the uptime could be translated to reliability or the technical availability of the fleet, and the cost could also be related to that. So yes, within the fleet industry we use the same formulas. If you look at industries that let's say apply heavily on contracts, like offshore companies, there we oftentimes look at the uptime related to the service level agreement as agreed upon in the contract. Because you can imagine, if you agree with an outside contract on a 90% uptime and you only deliver 88, that you might get a penalty from your customer that could be supported by the contract. Well, those are then consequence costs that we take into account in the whole formula. So yes, also for that industry we use the same formulas.
Okay. Also had a question about the model. Is it also applicable to facility management, maintenance of buildings?
To facility management, yeah, we, as you could see when we were talking about the companies that used maintenance, in fact, as a money maker, as we call it, they were very successful in applying improvements related to value-driven maintenance. They were in different industries. And if we look at the industries we serve, it's from the food and drink to the chemicals, life science, fleet, networking, utilities, water treatment, public transport. So it differs. And also facility management is oftentimes included. But then we could discuss, let's say, facility management in the environment of plants, but there's also facility management if we look at hotels, for example. And then we still end up with the same questions. What are the maintenance costs? How are they distributed across the different equipment or functional locations? And how does the reliability of the equipment impact the customer or the contract that is used? So yes, it can also be used in that environment. What we oftentimes see is that we are talking about maintenance right now, but many companies today are shifting to asset management. We see that in the utility companies, the network infrastructure companies, we see that happening. And as we speak, we are developing, or let's say further developing this model to VDM 2.0, which is all about asset management, in fact. And then things are included like lifetime extension and asset portfolio management. So when do I need to invest, or should I do a, let's say, invest in a replacement of an asset, or would it be more profitable to do a lifetime extension?
Okay. One listener wrote in several questions. You showed some process maps as well as different dashboards. Are those configurable by the user, or do those just come with a tool? The same person also asked about integrating this with your CMMS data, and what's the process for doing so?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. If we look at the process maps, that is a standard product which is focusing on different industries. So there are process maps available for the public transport, but also for the life science, for the chemicals, and other industries. In fact, the maintenance process in itself doesn't differ that much, but the terminology might change per industry. So that's why the process maps are dedicated to a certain industry. They are completely standard, but usually when we implement them, we use them as an accelerator, because we never say, okay, this is the way you need to work. I must say all the best practices that we already described are embedded in that process map. So from that perspective, it's really powerful, but it always needs to be the language on site, right? So if we implement that process map, we come in with the process map, but also tune it to the specific situation on site, the specific terms on site, and then through a workshop approach, we make sure that we get the right buy-in from the people on site, ending up with the fact that it's their process map and not ours. So yes, it's a standard product and it can be tuned to the specific customer situation. And the same in fact with the control panel, the dashboard. It is a dashboard that is, there are several dashboards available. The content is the same. One dashboard is developed completely in Business Objects, which is owned by SAP currently, and the other dashboard is developed in Cognos. It's the other, in fact, world leader in business intelligence. It's owned by IBM currently. So it's possible to put that dashboard on top on any CMMS and then collect the data from that specific CMMS, whether it's Maximo, SAP, or DataStream, collect that data in a kind of universe, let's say a box with predefined data, and from that the visualization in the control panel is made. The control panel is completely pre-configured, contains of over 100 KPIs and drill downs, so that's completely standardized. And it's our experience that in general we need only to tune it for about 5 to 10% to make it really specific to the situation of that certain client.
Excellent. Well, I see we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to try to read one more question, and then I apologize for those where I didn't get your questions in. Remco, are you able to stay a few more minutes and entertain a few more questions?
Yes, I can do that, and otherwise, if questions are not answered, people can always send me an email, and then I will answer the questions later.
Excellent, because we did have a few come right in at the end, and you have Remco's email address there in case we don't get to all of them. One listener asked, how do you measure or indicate the maintenance backlog, that when there's not enough budget and maintenance gets deferred, how do you account for that in these formulas?
Well, the maintenance backlog is in fact not in these formulas as such. It is one level too deep. If we look at the maintenance backlog, for us it is related to the competence of planning and preparation, but there we use the KPI, the amount of planned work orders that are also completed as scheduled or planned. It's in fact delivery precision. So it should say something about the accuracy of the planning process itself. And if you click on that KPI, then you go into the dashboard of planning and preparation, and then the maintenance backlog is one of the performance indicators that could, let's say, explain why your top KPI, the amount of planned work orders probably not completed in time, is not according to target. So for us it's not the main KPI, again that's another one, but if you see that, that you deviate from your planning, then you drill down, and then one of the causes could be the fact that you have a very high backlog. But another cause could be that you have a lot of incidental work orders coming in. You know, there's a best practice to prevent it from happening. It's gatekeeping. I might explain a little bit more about that in another webinar. But if you get a lot of incidental work requests from the operation, that will impact your day-to-day planning too. So maintenance backlog is definitely a performance indicator, but it's not the key performance indicator.
Okay, and another listener from the mining industry said that there's big fluctuations, they're very market driven, and it varies from week to week. And how can the maintenance model be applied when different pieces of equipment and production are being utilized at different times in response to market?
Yeah, well, if the market is really dynamic, then let's say if we talk about 1 week or so, then it becomes difficult, of course, because then you have to change all the time. But then, in fact, one of the main things is that you need to organize your ways of working to more opportunistic maintenance, probably. For example, it's what Volvo Cars did. They want to have a high uptime. What they said is that the windows to do maintenance are very small, so they prepared all the work orders in the so-called blue boxes. So the work orders that could be planned and scheduled, let's say planned, they prepared them completely in blue boxes, and when a part of the production line went down, then they knew exactly what could be done on that specific line, and they could collect the different work orders that were already prepared. Another thing is that also in the Volvo Cars environment, some of the plants were focusing on uptime, others were focusing on cost control, while in the end they were still using the same methodology and the same process blueprint. If we translate that to the organization, for example, the role of planner in a completely decentralized organization, which is the organization in Ghent in Belgium, there the maintenance planner is part of the operations team, while in the Höfte plant in Sweden, it's the engine factory, there the maintenance organization was completely centralized, and then the planner role was fulfilled by a white collar sitting behind the desk. So although the organizational setup differed, the roles were still the same, and they could still speak the same language and, let's say, apply the same process. But if your process is so dynamic that it changes all the time, well, then you should make sure that you become a very good opportunistic maintenance performer, as I said with the example of the blue boxes.
Okay, and maybe there's a short answer for this one, but one of our listeners indicated that they're just getting started with their CMMS, identifying assets and parts, and so, you know, for this tool, you talked about the different maturity levels, but what are a couple of quick wins that you can recommend for someone who's just getting started?
And the tool, is that the dashboard, or is it a complete VDM framework?
They're just actually getting started with their CMMS, collecting data, so maybe you can allude to what are some of the important things to collect initially.
Well, first of all, if you start with the implementation of your CMMS, of course, the main thing is about setting up a proper asset breakdown structure, because the asset or equipment breakdown structure is in fact the backbone of your system. Should not be too high, should not be too deep. If it's too high, you will not be able to find a root cause of problems. If it's too detailed, people will not register or record history on the lowest level of the equipment breakdown structure. And so it will be very difficult to manage that all. So a typical asset breakdown structure should be about 4 to 5 levels deep. And it's so important because your whole the data registration that you do in the system, but also the management information that can be derived from that, is connected to your asset breakdown structure. So if you do not define it properly, you will not be able to get the right management information out of the system, and it makes in fact the system kind of useless. It will be an electronic Rolodex instead of a maintenance management tool. So that's the first step, the asset breakdown structure. And then it's about identifying, for example, the critical spares that you have, making sure that you put in the right preventive maintenance schedules. And then I would say it's about the process of implementing is making sure that the feedback loop is closed, so that people feel that whenever they register something in the tool, that other people do something with it. And as soon as they see that if they register the downtime, for example, manually, or if they register the failure codes, you need to use the failure codes to determine root causes of problems and evaluate the performance of your preventive maintenance. If that is not done properly, then again it's useless. So, and that's a continuous improvement cycle that needs to be embedded also in the day-to-day meeting structure. So again, beside the tool, well, the tool, we have looked at the 5 circles. The tool is just IT. You need to think about the content, the quality of the data, and monitoring it. Make sure you set up the right content with the right asset breakdown structure, the failure codes, the right preventive maintenance schedules. Describe the process, how you would like to work, and preferably before you implement the system, and determine the impact on the organization and the skills of people. Maybe because of the implementation of the tool, some people need to be trained in the system or in methodologies like failure modes and effects analysis to understand why they need to put in the failure codes, for example. And then again, the 5th circle of performance management, make sure that you monitor what you are doing. You can also define performance indicators to determine the quality of the data that's coming out of the system. So my advice would be, look at those 5 areas of attention and not to the IT only.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Remco, for that synopsis. And I am afraid we are out of time. So again, for all the listeners out there who still have questions, this seemed to provoke many more questions, Remco, than that we've had in other sessions, please feel free to reach out to Remco directly or to myself, and I'll forward the questions to Remco. So thanks to everyone for attending, and thank you, Remco, for putting this together and taking the time, and thanks to all of our listeners. There'll be a brief survey at the end of the session, and we encourage you to fill it out and let us know how we did today and what topics you'd like us to bring going forward. So again, on behalf of Mainnovation and Remco Jonker and myself, thanks to everyone, and have a great day.